HARK! We are here. It is time for another episode of Regroup Phase. This week's Regroup Phase, we've got a lot of previews for you. We've got some Wookiees, we've got some Outlaws, creator previews, stream previews, all kinds of cool stuff going down. We've got more Mandalorians. More Mandalorians are always fun. So let's just get right into all of these lovely previews. Our first previews this week come by way of Echo Base Gaming. Link in the description below. We've got two cards here. Let's get started. We have here first Outlaw Corona, a 3-cost command space unit, 3 power, 5 health, underworld vehicle capital ship, bounty. Put the top card of your deck into play as a resource. This is a common number 116 out of 262 in SHD. This is very similar to the ships. I mean, it is one of Hondo's pirate ships. It's not specifically the one that he pilots, but if you've seen Clone Wars, they have these flying saucers for whatever reason. It's funny, but it also doesn't really make a whole lot of sense within the scope of Star Wars. This is a unit that for 3 becomes a 3/5. It's 1 more health than any other 3-cost ship that we've seen so far, Millennium Falcon being a 3/4. This is a risky card to play, much like many of the other bounty ones, but I think this one's the riskiest, because being able to just defeat this and put the top card of your deck into play as a resource is pretty powerful, especially against things that already want to ramp anyway. You play this against a Boba Fett, or you play this against a Palpatine, and you're just asking for it to get killed and accelerate their plans. So this is probably going to be one of those cards that's very good in limited, whereas having a bunch of those extra resources aren't as huge an impact because, again, you don't have the constructed strategies to be able to power play in with those resources. But a 3/5 for 3 in sealed and in draft, not honestly a terrible option. Next up, for the second preview, we have a Cunning Villainy unit. This is Kintan Intimidator, a 1-cost Cunning Villainy ground unit, 1 power, 4 health, underworld trait. On attack, exhaust the defender. A common, number 183 out of 262 in SHD. Much like the Vambrace grapple shot, I said it right this time, the idea of Kintan Intimidator is to tap down something that you want to be able to not have your opponent attack with on the next round or in the next action. Effectively, just basically using this as something to keep things tapped down as long as you attack into it. You can only attack so many times, but there are some strategies that exist within the cunning space that help a lot with making sure that this thing won't die. We know Jedi City exists, so we've seen Disarm, which reduces the power of a unit by 4 for a round, which is actually pretty good in combination with something like this, but we'd have to wait to see something else later that might give us more information about why this could be useful going forward. Given some of the cards that are coming up in previews. As it stands right now, it's a 1/4 for 1, so it stays on the board a little bit longer. Its on attack is not as useful, but it could prep you for a big Boba Fett hit, which somebody told me in the last video when I talked about this effect, which could be worthwhile. It just depends on if that's what you want to do with your 1 cost that round. Next up, we have 2 previews from Tabletop Misfits. Link in the description below. We've got 2 units. One's Cunning, one's Vigilance, but they do 2 very different things. So let's check out this first card. We have here Smuggler's Starfighter. This is a 3-cost Cunning space unit, 2 power, 2 health, underworld vehicle transport. When played, if you control another underworld unit, give an enemy unit -3/-0 for this phase. It also smuggles for 4 and a cunning. It is a common, number 215 out of 262 in SHD. This is the generic version of the Mist Hunter, which is piloted by Zuckuss and Forlom. So I don't really think we're going to see the Mist Hunter specifically in this set. Same as Slaver's Freighter is Houndstooth. We do know Punishing One exists rather than it being just a Jump Master or some other name. But here we have this ship, and this does mesh with that Kintan Intimidator we saw earlier, because when this comes into play, you can give one of your opponent's units -3/-0, and on your next action, exhaust it with the attack. However, the only problem with something like that, in terms of that combo, is your opponent could just attack to get it off the board if they know, or get the attack off the board since they know that's coming, or just deal something else to pump the power or kill your Intimidator. But there is a space of response that your opponent has to be able to figure out what they're going to do with that unit. So if you do reduce it to 0 power, there's no reason why your opponent would attack with it unless there's a very important on attack effect. But Smuggler Starfighter in combination with Kintan Intimidator is a basic combo that's actually probably going to be very powerful in limited. In terms of constructed, though, we'll have to see. It is a smuggle card. It only smuggles for 1 above its normal cost, which is not terrible. It is only a 2/2 though, so there's a lot of different things you got to figure out. Smuggler Starfighter ideally is basically pay 3, give that unit -3/-0 so long as another underworld unit exists on your side of the board. And with Cunning, there's a lot of underworld units. The second preview is the Vigilance unit we were talking about, and it's a Wookiee. We have here Worshir Tree Tender, a 3-cost Vigilance ground unit, 2 power, 4 health, Wookiee trait, Grit, common, number 61 out of 262 in SHD. Perfect draft card because not a lot of things are going to be able to take it out in one round, so it's going to be able to do an extra attack worth of damage out based upon that grit. It meshes with the Wookiee tribal, typal, whatever you want to call it, strategy of putting damage on your Wookiees and being able to deal some extra big damage. And because it is a Wookiee trait, it keys off other Wookiee traded abilities. This is also good in Rey because it is a 2-power unit, so you can throw an experience token on it effectively the same round it comes out if you have that 4 resource to be able to do that. Overall, should be an interesting strategy for these types of things going forward. I'm looking forward to seeing some other Wookiees. There's another Wookiee we've got coming up later on, I think maybe even 2, that's really powerful, and we've seen the other Wookiees that have come before, and while it's not a complete typal strategy just yet, it's only going to get stronger as we get more cards that have the Wookiee trait on it. Speaking of Wookiee Tribal, our next previews come by Nelson, all over cards. Link in the description below. We got 2 Wookiees, a Heroism one, and a Cunning one. So let's start with the Cunning one. We have here Fugitive Wookiee, a 2-cost Cunning ground unit, 3 power, 3 health, Wookiee. Bounty Exhaust a unit, a common, number 211 out of 262 in SHD. This is a very good card. There's a couple reasons for that. It's a 2-cost 3/3, so it fits that Battlefield Marine role without being restricted to 2 specific aspects. Since it's only Cunning, it could be run in any deck that runs Cunning in addition to whatever aspects it does in terms of other pairings. A 3/3 is very good for 2, and the bounty isn't so restrictive that it's immediately going to give your opponent a huge advantage, like draw cards, restoring health, dealing damage, getting resources, all those other different things. Exhausting a single unit, especially this early in the game, is not going to be as significant to play as it could be for some of those other bounties. So this Fugitive Wookiee can come in early, do some damage, and if it does get killed, it's only hindering one portion of what you have on the board. And if you have no other units on the board, your opponent actually has to exhaust their own unit, because it does specifically say when this unit is defeated or captured, your opponent collects its bounty. It does not say you may exhaust a unit, it says exhaust a unit. So you could theoretically bait your opponent into defeating this, and because it would be, if it's the only unit you have on the board, your opponent has to exhaust something on their side of the field in order to be able to do so. The rules document might specifically say that bounties are optional, but as it stands right now, from what we know, they are not, and this is a mandatory effect. So that could play into another aspect as to why this Fugitive Wookiee is very good. The second card from Nelson is another banger of a Wookiee. We have here Wookiee Warrior, a 4-cost Heroism ground unit, 2 power, 5 health, Wookiee, Grit. So Wookiees love their grit. When played, if you control another Wookiee unit, draw a card. This is a common, number 249 out of 262 in SHD. Wookiee Typal does lots of things with Wookiees. You have the grit to be able to deal more damage with this unit if it takes damage. Attack into a unit, refresh it, attack into another unit to be able to clear things off. The standard things you could do with grit. But the fact that this actually refreshes itself if you have another unit, a Wookiee unit on your side of the board, is absolutely incredible. I think this is going to see a lot of play in decks that want to be running a bunch of those Wookiees. If you're running Chewie that wants to run the Wookiee Typal plus some other extra stuff like Sentinels or high health units that can be played as Sentinels with Chewie's ability, that could be really good. But again, this is another decent card for Rey because it does have 2 power. So for 5, you can play the Wookiee, and on your next action, play the experience token onto it if your opponent hasn't damaged it under any form or fashion. And if you have another unit on the board that is a Wookiee, you draw the card and you just keep on gaming. And that's how it is. And honestly, I think this Wookiee strategy is pretty cool, comboing with the things like Gentle Giant, where that can just keep healing the things that you have and dealing damage to your opponent with the big health that it has. It's just super, super good strategy for Wookiees going forward. Our first leader of the week comes by way of FFG Socials. It's not a character I was expecting to see a leader, but one I'm very happy to see, especially given the effect that she has. We have here Fennec Shand honoring the deal, Cunning, Heroism, Underworld, already a banger of a leader. Action, 1 resource, exhaust the leader, play a unit from your hand that costs 4 or less, paying its cost, give it ambush for this phase. Epic action on 5 flips into a 4/4. This is a common number 16 out of 262 in SHD. And that 4/4 presents to you Saboteur, which is really good, showcases her sniper skills. Action, play a unit that costs 4 or less from your hand, paying its cost, give it ambush for this phase. Fennec Shand is the ambush leader, much how Chewie is the sentinel leader. Chewie does 3 or less, Fennec can do 4 or less, but there's a lot of really good things that you can do with 4 or less units. No aspect restriction, just 4 or less, and paying the cost. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with that. I think this leader is going to be very valuable in terms of being able to do that. The ability to do that for 1 cost on the front side is really cool, but on the unit side, so it's effectively if you have a 4 cost that costs you 5 total to do it. This side, it's just an action. It's not a once per turn action. It's not an epic action. It's not an action exhaust this leader. It's not an on attack. If you have the resources to be able to continue ambushing units with her as the leader on your side of the board, she can absolutely start crushing people with the pressure of here's a Greedo, here's a Greedo, here's a Greedo. Just like slam into things and defeat him and use your abilities to be able to do extra stuff. It's really, really decent card here, and I'm very excited to see what players come up with to be able to do so. The one downside is that, yes, she's a 4/4 with no protection, but coming out at 5, if you can get 2 ambushes off for that turn, I think for that round, I think that she can be very valuable in the long run, especially considering the fact that she is also Underworld, and Underworld likes to do lots of tricksy things, and Fennec Shand is here to ambush people with those tricksy things. On Wednesday, June 5th, FFG came to us live presenting more Star Wars Unlimited gameplay with cards from Shadows of the Galaxy, as well as a bunch of previews for that stream. We're going to go over the previews here right now, including one of my brand new favorite new bases to see. I know this is going to be really stupid for a lot of people, but for me, it strikes to the core of my Star Wars heart. We have here Coronet City, the capital of Corellia, hunting base, 30 health, common, 25 out of 262, and SHD. Star Wars Galaxies players are going to recognize this city. People who actually very much enjoyed Solo, a Star Wars story, are also going to recognize this. Coronet City is the basis of a lot of stories in Star Wars that deal with Corellia specifically. Corellia is a very popular planet. It's a very important planet in terms of the different wars that have happened throughout the history of Star Wars. I'm so happy this is here. This will probably be my, unless I'm playing Sabine Cunning, which does chopper base because that's the Rebels theme, or any other Rebels character that wants a cunning base, I will probably play this as my cunning base for every other character that wants a cunning base. There it is. Easy peasy, 30 health, cunning, doesn't matter. Picture's awesome. Absolutely, you can see the little stolen land speed of the Star Destroyer. Coronet City is here. In terms of gameplay relevant cards, we've got 3 of them to go over, 2 cunning cards and a villainy card. Let's start with this villainy card because it's another thing from Star Wars Galaxies. We have here the Black Sun Starfighter. This is a 3-cost villainy space unit, 3 power, 2 health, underworld vehicle fighter, Sentinel, common, 237 out of 262, and SHD. We've already seen, and I'm going to get this wrong, a Kiraxis Starfighter in command from this set, but now we have a villainy version that represents the Black Sun, which is pretty cool. You can see obviously the Black Sun iconography on here. And for villainy, having a 3-cost 3/2 Sentinel, this is basically your cell block guard in space. This will probably take out at least 1 fighter on the back crack unless your opponent's just doing damage or hitting it with something that has low power and high health. So this isn't obviously going to take out a Bright Hope, but it'll do a chunk of damage into it. It's a really cool fighter. This is going to be a draft and sealed all-star if you're playing villainy, because space units are very important in limited environments because you don't get them very often. Black Sun Starfighter, excellent card. Very happy to see it. Next up, we have a very good cunning unit that fits the Underworld deck, regardless of whether you're heroism or villainy. This is Cloud Rider, Cloud-Rider. 2-cost cunning ground unit, 3 power, 1 health, Underworld, ambush. Common, 210 out of 262, and SHD. There's not much to say about this card. For 2 costs, this kills anything with 3 health automatically, and then you just move on with your day. If it happens to survive, I don't know how it could. If you're striking something with 0 damage or 0 power, it'll survive. Its 1 health means that it's not going to be doing much, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is to get in there, smack something for 3, and then move on to the next action you want to take in a turn. Literally, that's it. It's a 2-cost 3 damage effect, effectively. Our last stream preview card is a very important card for Underworld and really does give some extra credence to some of the things that were coming out of this set. It's a piece of art we've seen before. Fantastic character. We have here Emphas Nest, Marauder, 6 cost cunning ground units. I like that these cards have been cunning only, no morality aspects, so you can run them on either side. 5 power, 4 health, underworld trait, ambush, so she has ambush herself. When a friendly unit, including this one, is attacking using ambush, the defender gets -3, -0. This is an uncommon, number 219 out of 262 in SHD. This is one of the cards that when you play another ambusher, if she's on the board, much like that Cloud Rider we just talked about, could potentially survive the crackback of an attack if it attacks something with 3 power, because this is giving your opponent's units -3 while you're attacking them with ambush. So stacked with something like Fennec Shan, who can ambush things, cheap things, ambush a Greedo out, as long as that thing has 3 power or less. Greedo survives, can do other things, all kinds of cool stuff that are there. And with her being able to ambush anything 4 cost or less, or Cunning have a lot of ambush effects themselves, and Emphas Nest herself ambushing, there's a lot of really cool things that can be done. The only thing that would make this any better is if you could ambush with some of the stuff that you have that's ready to smuggle. Now, there are some cards that can ambush out of smuggle, but the thing that's going to combo very good with Emphas Nest when you're able to give things ambush or things that have ambush in your resource row is tech. Tech is going to be relevant basically in every single deck that wants to play him moving forward, because it makes everything you have smuggle, which means anything that you have ambush while this is on the board is going to be able to attack into something and not take as much damage back. And that's pretty darn good. I lied. There was one extra preview that I forgot about that was separated from the other previews, and that's why I didn't see these things all together. I record this after the things happen. We have one final card from the stream. It is an upgrade. It is one of the most important upgrades in this set, and I'm very excited to see it. Not very excited for its rarity, because it means it's going to be very difficult for me to chase down for specific reasons. We have here the Dark Saber, a 4-cost command upgrade. Command? Why command? That doesn't make any sense. Attached to a non-vehicle unit. While playing this upgrade on a Mandalorian unit, ignore its aspect penalty. Attached unit gains on attack, give an experience token to each other friendly Mandalorian unit. +4 power, +3 health, Mandalorian item weapon, Darksaber. Legendary, number 126 out of 262 in SHD. The Darksaber is here. Any Mandalorian that can equip it without having to pay its aspect penalty, which means you could play it in a deck that's just aggression vigilance or cunning vigilance or cunning aggression, any combination thereof, and you get to play the Darksaber so long as it's targeting a Mandalorian unit. And then the fact that when this unit attacks with the Darksaber, which is pretty significant, you can give an experience token to each other friendly Mandalorian unit. That is amazeballs. Absolutely amazeballs. Mando loves this. Bo loves this. A leader we're going to see later loves this. Sabine loves this. All the Mandalorians love this. Give this to the Armorer. Let her just chop people down like crazy. I love this card. I'm super excited for it. The fact that it's a legendary crushes my soul, because it means it's going to be overvalued, because it's already the Darksaber. I'm not saying this is going to be the Darth Vader of the set, but it might be close. The Darksaber is here. This is also a playmat we're going to get from GameGenic, so get on those orders now. Talk to your LGSs and make sure you can get those pre-orders in. And the Darksaber is here. Our next preview comes by way of FFG Socials. This is the first in a line of double single aspect cards. We had this last set with things like Attack Pattern Delta and Cantina Bouncer and Protector, I believe was the Vigilance one. Rally Cry for aggression. We've got our first one. People managed to vote for Command. So let's see what our first double command card is. That double command card is Endless Legions, a 14 resource cost double command supply event. Reveal any number of resources you control. Play each unit revealed this way for free, one at a time. This is a legendary, number 109 out of 262 in SHD. I said it on Twitter, if you follow me there. This is probably going to be my set 3 deck. Because look at them clones. I've always loved clones since day one. They've always reminded me of Mandalorians, and there's a good reason, because they're basically developed off of Mandalorians. Endless Legions is a card that looks like it's never going to get played, but in Double Command, you have so many different options of being able to play cards that resource themselves. Resupply, a Super Laser Technician, Command. There are going to be things like Price on Your Head, which is going to take the top card of your deck and put it into your resource pile as a bounty. You have that Outlaw Corona, which also If you kill that on your opponent's side of the field, gives you a resource. You do have to control what you yourself are playing down for resources to make a big benefit out of this. But eventually, once you hit that 14, you play Endless Legions, you flip your cards. Now you have a big board worth of stuff. And I mean, if all you do is drop a Finalizer and a Vader and a Reinforcement Walker, a Maul, any of those big things, absolutely fantastic. And because you're going to be accelerating based on likely having a command leader, it's going to be really good. I have an idea that what's going to end up happening is we're going to see a lot of clones in command that are going to be able to take use of this Endless Legions ability. We already have Hunter and a bunch of his boys, not necessarily including Wrecker and Wolf or Omega, but we do have a lot of command-based stuff that does so far work with clones, which is very cool. I'm very excited to see what this card is going to do moving forward, but right now, it's just a big splashy, I'm going to pay 14 and play everything from my resource row. Beat me now. Our next card is the second leader of the week that we were previewed. This is a very fun leader. I'm excited for it. Not necessarily as excited as some of the other leaders that I've seen, but I'm very hyped to get a leader in this specific pairing that deals with a specific trait that I enjoy. Let's get to it. We have here Gar Saxon, Viceroy of Mandalore, a Vigilance, Villainy, Imperial, Mandalorian official leader. Each friendly upgraded unit gets +1/+0. Epic action flip for 6 into a 4/6. Common number 001 out of 262 in SHD. Leader side, the text says each friendly upgraded unit gets +1/+0 and gains. When defeated, you may return an upgrade that was attached to this unit to its owner's hand. So Gar Saxon is here to do a Krennic-like thing, but rather than damaged units, you are upgraded units. And because Mandalorians love their upgrades, you're going to have a lot of viability with this specific leader. We're going to see some cards coming up here that are very viable with Gar Saxon. We've already seen the Death Watch Commander, Death Watch Loyalist, be able to have some cool stats based upon stuff, and then you can stack any of your Vigilance Villainy, Aggression Villainy, or just Vigilance and just Aggression Mandalorians in this deck that also work very well with upgrades, and you have a lot of really good benefits of Gar Saxon. 6 flip 4/7 is very average for the stats that we've seen in the game, obviously not necessarily representative of Boba Fett, who's very pushed, but we do have here at least a cool leader that has a very viable front side passive effect, just +1 for each of your upgrades units, +1 power, and then on the backside you can start recurring some of those upgrades that you might be losing. Obviously this doesn't count for, you get the +1/+0 for having an experience or a shield, but you can't take those back to the hand with the when defeated because they fizzle. They're ephemeral. They don't exist outside of the play space. So Gar Saxon, excellent leader here. Very happy to see him. We got our heroism Mandalorian relevant leader with Bo-Katan and our villainy relevant Mandalorian leader with Gar Saxon. I'm happy. I'm a happy guy. Next up, we have 2 cards here relevant to the preview we just saw with Gar Saxon, coming by way of Max Tapera over on YouTube. Link in the description below. Both of these cards are very cool, very good, very upgrades relevant, very Gar Saxon relevant. Let's get to it. We have here our first card, Brutal Traditions, a 2-cost Vigilance Villainy upgrade. Action. If an enemy unit was defeated this phase, play this upgrade from your discard pile, paying its cost. +1/+2, so 1 power, 2 health. Brutal Traditions, learned trait, an uncommon number 38 out of 262 in SHD. Brutal Traditions turns on Gar Saxon's effect for any person that it's on, and even if your opponent defeats the unit that has this, as long as you've defeated another unit in the phase and you have the resources to play this, you can plop this bad boy right on, effectively making any of your units that are upgraded a 2/2 while it has this on it, which is fantastic. Stick it on a follower of the way, and you've got power bonuses out the wazoo and health bonuses for the same cost. This is a fantastic card, and this is going to see a lot of play in Upgrade Matters decks for villainy. This is going to be one of the key cards that Gar Saxon uses as a 3 of in his deck, because it can be played from the discard pile. One of the main downsides of upgrades is that if you play it on a unit and that unit gets defeated, you lose the ability to continue using that upgrade. Not the case of Brutal Traditions. Just stick it back on your character and start flame throwing everything around you. And you know what? That's fantastic. The second preview is a space unit. We have here Clan Saxon Gauntlet. This is a 6-cost Vigilance Villainy space unit, 4 power, 5 health, Mandalorian vehicle transport. It has Sentinel. When this unit is attacked, you may give an experience token to a unit before damage is dealt. This is an uncommon number 35 out of 262 in SHD. So going along the lines of upgrades matter, you have a space unit that can survive a couple of hits, and you can also give itself the experience token, which then gives it +1 power from Gar Saxon's leader ability. And on top of that, it makes it this get an increased power and health ratio based upon being attacked. Your opponent does not want to attack this, because even if you don't give it the experience token, you can give something else on your board an experience token, which then gives the power up from Gar Saxon, or just becomes a harder to defeat unit, or a unit that could end up beating your opponent because that 1 power ended up mattering, or 2 power technically, if it doesn't already have upgrades on it. Clan Saxon Gauntlet is another card that's going to be a 3 of in the Gar Saxon deck, because it works so well. You get that if you just use it on this, independent of any other unit, this becomes a 5/6 Sentinel for 6, and because it gives the experience token before damage is dealt, your opponent can attempt to attack into this thinking they're going to be able to get the benefit of just knocking it out before it actually gets any value, and then all of a sudden 1 health adds onto it, 2 power with no other sources. So this ends up becoming a 6/6, and your opponent's like, what did I just do? This is the Fet's Fire Spray Destroyer, although it will die in return, obviously. This is the anything with 6 health destroyer that attacks into this because you have to. It's got Sentinel unless your opponent ignores it. Gar Saxon Gauntlet, really good. I think this is actually the better of the 2 gauntlets. We've seen the Survivor's Gauntlet before, which that one's okay, but Gar Saxon Gauntlet is definitely a really good card and a really good play for Saxon himself. And we'll see if any other Mandalorian strategies in Villainy end up utilizing this card as much as he does. Our next card is another card from FFG Socials, link in the description below. We have another Mandalorian who is very interesting. We have here Vizsla Power Hungry, a 7-cost aggression villainy ground unit, 8 power, 7 health, Mandalorian Trooper. When played and on attack, you may pay the cost of an upgrade attached to another non-vehicle unit. If you do, take control of that upgrade and attach it to this unit, if able. If it can't attach to this unit, defeat it instead. This is a rare number 142 out of 262 in SHD. Vizsla comes down, and bare minimum, all you have to do to make him super valuable on the when play is to steal one of your opponent's experience tokens or shields, because they are upgrades and they cost 0. It just helps Vizsla be able to do all kinds of fun stuff. He gets to steal an experience token and become a 9/8. He gets to steal a shield and become a undamageable unit unless you deal the damage beforehand. And then he gets to do the same thing on attack. The big play, obviously, is stealing one of your opponent's lightsabers or one of their dark sabers, anything cool like that. Obviously, you can't take any of the vehicle upgrades because this can't target any of those units anyway. But if you end up attempting to take something, to clear something off of a unit that says something to the effect of clone only or force only or rebel only, that's when you would have this second ability come into play, which is just defeating it instead. We don't have anything like that yet, although I do wish that the lightsabers did say force only, with all of the text just being as relevant as it is, instead of you get a bonus if you're a force unit, because that just makes more sense to me. But in the short term, Vizsla comes down for 7, takes an experience token, takes a shield, attacks, does the same thing, and just ends up stealing all of the upgrades himself. And if you're playing with Gar Saxon, he gets +1 power for having an upgrade attached to him that he could just steal off your opponent's unit no matter what. So you're saving this for when you can steal something either super relevant in the late game, or on your 7 to be able to steal a shield that's troubling you, or an experience token that your opponent has, because that is effectively free. Vizsla, fantastic card, love him, only a rare. Gonna see lots of play. Booyah. Our next 2 previews are more Mandalorian previews coming by way of Jedi News. Link to their article in the description below. It's Mandalorian time, apparently. Thank you, FFG. We like it. Let's go. Fenrau, Protector of Concord Dawn. We have a 6-cost Vigilance ground unit, 5 power, 6 health Mandalorian trait. When played, you may play an upgrade from your hand. It costs 2 less. When you play an upgrade on this unit, give an enemy unit -2/-2 for this phase. This is an uncommon number 67 out of 262 in SHD. Fenrau, very good. He's a basic 5/6 with Mandalorian trait 4/6 cost, but the fact that he brings in an upgrade from your hand is really good. You can play something like Vambrace Grapple Shot or Mandalorian Armor onto him directly to be able to get the trigger for the second clause of his unit text here, or you can throw something like a Snapshot Reflexes onto a unit that you have ready, which you wouldn't get the upgrade, the -2/-2 for that, but that's okay if you can get an attack in that's going to be able to damage an opponent's unit. Any upgrade can be played on this unit for -2 when you play it, so you could play a lightsaber on him if you wanted to. It would cost you 1. we don't know if that's necessarily going to be the base idea of what you want to run for a character like him. But lots of Mandalorian upgrades, lots of different things. He works really well with Gar Saxon because he can give himself +1/+0 with the upgrade that he plays, which also pairs pretty well with the -2/-2 on opposing unit if you want to attack into that unit with another unit that turn, or with the Mandalorian himself. When you play the upgrade on any unit from Fen Rao's ability, you get to exhaust an opposing unit if you haven't already done that this round. So Fen Rao gives a lot of really cool, neat strategies with the different upgrades that you can do depending on when you're going to play them on him to give your opponent's units -2/-2, which is not a once per round clause, and then or drop a upgrade on one of your other units that will allow them to be effective for more things. This is what's going to be very important going forward in this game, being able to do more than one thing with your action, each alternation of actions, and Fen Rao really does that for you. So this is pretty fantastic. The second preview from Jedi News is another Mandalorian. This is another really good one. We have here House Cast Soldier, a 2-cost aggression ground unit, 2 power, 3 health, Mandalorian Trooper, Saboteur, common, number 162 out of 262 in SHD. This is your Rebel Pathfinder, but Mandalorian, and specifically aggression instead of heroism, because this can go in any of the 3 decks if you choose to use aggression with that character, or if it already has aggression. Any of the 4 decks technically, because Sabine is also a Mandalorian leader. Comes in, does its damage, saboteurs a shield off your opponent's units, does whatever it needs to do. Upgrade synergy, you put upgrades on it. It does more damage to things to your opponent's base, bypassing sentinels and shields, or just knocking a shield off and trying to take out a unit. Small unit, super good though, gives you an easier base to be able to stick the units into your deck, and because it's not heroism or villainy, it goes anywhere that aggression has access to. Shout out to the Jodo cast though. This is a House Cast Soldier. I'm deeply hoping that if there is a Jodo cast in this set, that they're the ones that get to preview that character, because one, that's hugely relevant to them, but at the same time, Jodo cast is one of my favorite Mandalorians as well, because much like them, that was a card that I got back when I used to play the Star Wars customizable card game. I still have my Jodo cast, and it's super cool. So other than that though, House Cast Soldier here, ready to go, bang bang bang, saboteuring their way to victory for Mandalore. Our next preview comes by way of the unlimited FFG social accounts. Lots of these coming through FFG, which is fantastic. That's how we get our previews. It's a unit. It's a good unit. Let's check it out. We have here Maz Kanata Pirate Queen, a 1-cost command heroism ground unit, 1 power, 1 health, underworld trait. When you play another unit, give an experience token to this unit. This is a rare, number 96 out of 262 in SHD. Maz Kanata is basically the perfect 1-drop to put into play, because as other units come onto the board, she gets bigger and you can focus your resources on getting those other units more powerful. A great example of starting off is Maz and an R2, Maz and a Dispatcher, Maz and a Greedo, whatever it is that you want to do there. Or you can set up some defensive lines. If you're playing Luke, you can go Maz and Luke's shield. Same thing with Rey, you can do Maz and an experience token, and then on your next turn play a couple of units to be able to get the extra experience tokens onto this unit. A lot of really cool lines of play that go into this card. This is going to see a lot of play in those white weenie decks, which we talked about with the Rey video a couple of weeks back. Fantastic card. I'm looking forward to playing her a lot in that deck, because she does get big benefits for just playing a lot of units, and that's what those decks want to do. Next up, we have 2 previews coming by way of Wooooo over on YouTube. Link in the description below. We've got a unit, we've got an event. Let's start with the unit. We have here Mercenary Gunship, a 2-cost aspect list space unit, 3 power, 2 health, underworld vehicle fighter traits. Action, 4 resources. Take control of this unit. Any player may use this ability. This is an uncommon, number 256 out of 262 in SHD. I'm actually surprised to see this ship specifically, since we did get the Xanadu Blood, which does mean we could get named versions of the other ships that we've seen generics of. But for this card specifically, a 2-cost 3/2 in space is actually quite good. It's a little bit better than most of the other ships you're going to get into space at this cost. The only downside is that your opponent can pay 4 to take control of this unit. So you really want to be able to use this first in your first action every round, so that way your opponent can't take control of it. But if they do take control of it, there's not going to be too much they can do with it that specific round. And you got to hope that you have the resources to take it back, so on and so forth. It's a cool early game ship. Mid and late game, it's not going to be as impactful and could potentially become a liability, but there's an interesting gambit and gamble to playing this unit, and that's pretty cool design. The second preview we have here is an event. It's a fairly thematic event, and it's pretty cool. Let's check it out. We have here Spark of Hope, a 2-cost command heroism innate event. Choose a unit in your discard pile if it was defeated this phase, put it into play as a resource. This is an uncommon, number 105 out of 262 in SHD. Basically, if your opponent blows up your biggest unit or a unit that you want to make sure you can accelerate your resource pace, you can play Spark of Hope to take that unit from your discard pile and put it into play as a resource exhausted, because remember, everything comes into play exhausted unless it says otherwise. So this it's a soft ramp effect. You have to lose something to be able to utilize this and get it, but it does continue ramping you in the things that you want to do. Early game, not as effective. Late game can be super effective depending on what you might have. If you're running this in a double command deck that utilizes Endless Legions, which we talked about earlier, this can actually be a blowout play, because your opponent can defeat your big unit, you can Spark of Hope it back, and on the next round, Endless Legions it back onto the board because you have a ton of resources available to you. So, fairly interesting card. So thankfully this does not combo with the Emperor, who can defeat units, defeat his own units, and trigger off of Spark of Hope. But it is going to be an interesting play for heroism decks that want to be able to get those resources into play as quickly as possible. As previously stated, on June 5th, FFG came to us live with more Shadows of the Galaxy gameplay, showcasing some examples of gameplay with our new leaders. Each of the people that were on the stream, Danny, Ryan, and Xander, all played new leaders from Shadows of the Galaxy to showcase what type of deck building options you have. So we're going to go over these decks really quickly. We're not going to go over the numbers and every single thing we possibly can, but we'll go over some interesting tech choices for each deck and why some of these decks look really darn cool. So we're going to get started with Danny's Ray command deck. You can see Ray here underneath my head. We have Energy Conversion Lab, so we are looking at a Vigilance Heroism command deck. You can see here, pause if you'd like, the full layout of the video. I'll point out a couple of different choices. Really starting off right off the bat, tech, very important in this deck because you're playing a lot of low cost units because of those 2 powers that you have and less that go around with the deck. You really want to make sure you have the ability to smuggle cards out because you're going to be running out of cards from your hand very quickly. Only 1 piece of removal, which is pretty suspicious. Takedown is a very good card, but it's one of those things that I probably would have elected to at least put 1 more piece of removal in the deck. But starting off the bat, we do have a nice suite here of 1-cost units, particularly the Moisture Farmer, which we talked about, I think, when I was talking about Ray in the specific video. This is actually very good for her deck because she can pump it 3 times. We have the Clone Deserter, excellent choice here. 2/1B Surgical Droid is an interesting tech choice, so you can remove the damage that your units have taken. Concord Dawn Interceptor is the MVP of this deck. Bright Hope, another really good space sentinel. You're not really focusing on trying to do as much damage in space. You want to do all your damage on ground. The only 2 cards that exist in this deck that are higher than 2 power is Cobb Vanth at his 3 power, and the reason why this is played is because you can get one of your lower cost 2 power or less units back into play utilizing his effect. And then we have Echo here, which has 4 power, but the idea is that you want to be able to just discard a card from your hand to give some of your units that you do have the extra experience tokens to be able to push forward. Modded Cohort seemed to put in a lot of work, and it does make sense. Ambush Raid 2 on a 4-cost 2/4, which can end up doing more damage with Ray's effect. Fantastic way to build this deck with command, and it's a pretty good choice. I like this deck list. I don't know that I would really change too much. I think I would have to play some games with this list. I think there are definitely better options than Warzone Lieutenant and potentially 2/1B, but I do like the way that this deck looks initially because it does what Ray wants to do. Lots of low power units to be able to get buffed by Ray, try to control the board with those different units that you have, and have Modded Cohort just wreck things as best as it possibly can, and Echo buffing the units with the experience tokens with your extra cards. And tech being tech. Next deck, we have Ryan on Cad Bane, Coronet City. Excellent job here. This is your standard cunning list that we see a lot with Boba Fett, cunning. It does, however, add things like Evazan, Xanadu Blood, Bazine. We do have the use of Bib Fortuna and Bounty Hunter Crew, which I love both of those options. Cloud Rider and Memphis Nest did put in some work. This is kind of just your average Underworld/Hunters deck that you're going to be able to play with Cad Bane that just requires you sequencing your events and the things that you play very carefully. Evazan, risky choice. I do actually understand why it's in here, because in combination with Maclunky, you can definitely do a lot of damage to your opponent's forces. Utilize the shielded Evazan to be able to damage something low enough that Maclunky can clear it off the board, and then Maclunky it back to your hand before it effectively ruins you when your opponent eventually removes Evazan from the board. Very interesting deck. It is still kind of just your average double cunning deck with some choices moved here and there. No Bodhi Rook in here. Very interesting choice, but Pirated Starfighter is able to pick up some of your units to put them back down, much like Bib or Crafty Smuggler or Evazan. Again, focusing a lot on trying to make sure that you can get Evazan back into play with the shielded token or not risk being absolutely annihilated by the bounty effect. And then the last deck, my favorite deck, comes here from Xander playing Bo-Katan on Remnant Science Facility. So this is an aggression, heroism, vigilance deck. This is Mando.deck with the inclusion of the Darksaber and some of the other units that we have here. The whole deck is built around doing Mandalorian things with Mandalorians to get those extra effects off Bo-Katan. Xander was able to pile a bunch of upgrades onto Bo-Katan in order to be able to deal a ton of damage with her. But even still, a lot of the upgrades can do some work onto the other units that you have. Entrenched is a pseudo control use. Another deck that only really has one option of removal, technically two if you count Entrenched, and low space presence. We do have the Concord Dawn, the Razor Crest, and the Survivor's Gauntlet, but I do like the choice of dropping in the Hotshot DL44 Blaster. It's a fantastic card for these decks that want you to have upgrades. You don't get to play it for its, you do get to play it for its smuggle cost. It just costs 2 additional, so instead of costing 3, it would cost 5 in this deck. So it's not usually the way you play that card, but a 1 cost plus 2 power, not terrible. Lots of really cool options here. Mandalorian Warrior, MVP. But this is probably what your average Bo-Katan deck is going to look like. You might end up seeing a shift in numbers of specific cards, because we do have only 2 of the Concord Dawn, 2 of the Razor Crest, 2 of the Mandalorian, a bunch of different things like that. You might see some ratios go up, some ratios go down, but it'd be very interesting to see how this goes forward. 3 copies of the Darksaber, though, super important. I love the way that Xander chose to build this deck. It showcased itself really well in the games that he played and was able to get some cool stuff. This is the way, of course, very valuable card. Searches those Mandalorians, searches those upgrades, and you just have lots of shenanigans going on with Mandalorians in these decks. So there you go. Those are the developer decks. If they keep doing stuff like that, I'll keep covering it. Hopefully this format is a little bit better than me just running through every single card choice and picking out specific things that matter for the deck moving forward. And that is it. We have all the previews previewed this week. Lots of fun stuff coming out. Some new cunning cards, some new command cards, some new Mandalorians, some new Underworld stuff. Lots of really fun things going on with Shadows of the Galaxy. Hopefully we'll have the set finished in the next couple of weeks, so that way I can start working on the aspect reviews like we did with Spark of the Rebellion. But Shadows of the Galaxy is a scant 1 month away from release, pre-release less than that, which is fantastic. So hopefully we get everything done and everything can be done. And with that, we are done. Remember to like and comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on all of my lovely social medias at RybackStun with everywhere that you can find me. You know how to support me. I appreciate everything y'all do for these videos. Thank you. We'll see you next time. And with that, I will see you in the stars.